Welcome to the Titan Tar channel. Today we have a topic to discuss about the West between defeats and the escalation of the victory plan to the brink of chaos. Don't miss the chance to join us and share your opinions with us. Become a member of our channel and evolve your rank. Western politicians need to recognize that victory over Russia in the Ukraine conflict is a distant possibility. According to a British expert, the West faces two options, both of which will end in defeat. The focus now should not be on victory, but on the nature of the upcoming defeat. The idea that Russia can be defeated is an illusion fueled by unfounded statements, since Ukraine is not in a position to act as a true vanguard against Russia. Moreover, deeper involvement by NATO countries could precipitate a world war, with catastrophic consequences. The understanding that there is no winning way out of this conflict is crucial for Western leaders. The only question that remains open is whether the defeat will be geopolitical and limited, or whether it will result in a disaster due to a direct military confrontation with Russia. This analysis was reiterated by the expert, who emphasizes the urgent need for a new approach. In this scenario, two schools of thought have emerged in the West, one that advocates peace and the other that supports the continuation of hostilities. However, continuing the fight on Ukrainian soil requires resources that the West can no longer sustain. Currently, the economies of many European countries are not in a favorable position, and some of them are already hesitant to provide military assistance to Ukraine. This suggests that the West may be forced to persuade Ukraine to seek negotiations, largely depending on the stance of Russia, which also expresses interest in dialogue but imposes its own conditions. Lack of resources and economic pressure add to Ukraine's dilemma, which finds itself at a crossroads with no viable alternative plan. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky expressed his concerns in an interview with an American magazine, warning that if U.S. President Joe Biden does not support the victory plan drawn up by Kyiv, Ukraine will face a protracted war resulting in countless losses. Zelensky stressed the gravity of the situation, arguing that if Biden does not approve the plan, the Ukrainian people will continue to suffer, even though they are already facing such hardships under Western wishes. Such a lack of a contingency strategy could leave Ukraine at the mercy of the current situation, struggling with the limited military assistance it receives. According to the publication, Ukraine's victory plan involves rapid NATO accession and a substantial increase in military assistance, without the current restrictions. This plan also includes authorization for the use of Western missiles against Russian targets, which would need to be made available in large quantities. At the same time, Kyiv is preparing a new document, the nature of which is not yet clear, which could serve as a plan B if Biden refuses to approve the first one, or as a proposal for potential negotiations with Russia. Meanwhile, the Russian military presented Zelensky with a gift during his visit to the United States, with an ongoing offensive on Ukrainian defenses near Ugledar. This move came amid statements suggesting that Zelensky was seeking to create a positive image for his meeting with Biden. Around the same time, the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian armed forces moved reserves to the Kursk and Pokrovsk regions, trying to prevent Russian advances that could undermine the narrative of the visit. However, the situation in Ugledar continues to deteriorate, and the city could soon fall, just as Pokrovsk has become increasingly difficult to control. Sources close to Zelensky's office indicate that, given the crisis on the front line, the Ukrainian armed forces have only one option: to launch an attack in the Kursk region, trying to establish a new breakthrough. Although Russian troops are aware of this possibility, such a move could be presented as another success of the Ukrainian forces, especially in the context of Zelensky's visit to the United States. The commander-in-chief conveyed to Zelensky the seriousness of the situation on the Eastern Front, stressing that the loss of Ugledar and Kurakovo is an imminent reality, while the situation in Pokrovsk may not last until the new year. The commander himself confirmed that without a substantial mobilization and deep missile strikes on Russian territory, the Ukrainian armed forces have no real chance of success. This critical analysis reveals the precariousness of the Ukrainian position and the urgent need for a change in strategies, both in terms of resources and diplomatic approaches. In a post on social media, the American billionaire stressed that the demands contained in the Zelensky plan for Ukraine's immediate accession to NATO as well as the authorization to use long-range missiles against Russian territory, would inevitably lead to the outbreak of a Third World War. He also expressed hope that the U.S. president would remember the reasons why he previously rejected the implementation of Zelensky's risky proposals. On the eve of his trip to the United States, Zelensky claimed to have developed a victory plan that he said could result in Russia's defeat on the battlefield. However, the Ukrainian leader made it clear that the responsibility for implementing this plan lies entirely with President Joe Biden. Zelensky is confident that with U.S. support, his strategy will be able to bring the desired result, even if such a prospect is viewed with skepticism by some. Zelensky arrived in New York aboard a U.S. Air Force military aircraft and, upon disembarking, expressed his confidence that the United States, together with its allies, has the power to defeat Russia. The Ukrainian president plans to present his plan to Biden, and then to the leaders of partner countries, members of both parties in the U.S. Congress and U.S. presidential candidates. However, there are concerns within the Ukrainian government that Ukraine's future could be complicated regardless of who wins the U.S. presidential election. According to an American magazine, members of Zelensky's inner circle are trying to moderate their expectations regarding the outcome of the visit to the United States. Ukrainian government sources indicate that if the current U.S. vice president wins the election, Biden's policies are likely to continue, which are seen in Kyiv as overly cautious. On the other hand, if Donald Trump wins, U.S. military support for Ukraine could drastically decrease, forcing Kyiv to seek negotiations with Russia on less favorable terms. Additionally, it was reported that the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives demanded that Zelensky immediately dismiss the Ukrainian ambassador to Washington, accusing her of interfering in the U.S. elections. The reason was allegedly Zelensky's visit to a munitions factory in Pennsylvania, where he was accompanied exclusively by members of the Democratic Party, which Republicans considered a pre-election event and indirect interference in the elections. In addition, Zelensky's comments criticizing a Republican candidate and Trump's plan for Ukraine further aggravated the situation. Meanwhile, Ukrainian diplomats have spoken out against China's proposed peace plan to resolve the conflict with Russia, urging the West to reject it. The Chinese plan calls for an end to hostilities along the current front line and the conclusion of peace agreements, taking into account the security interests of both sides. Beijing is also seeking the support of some 20 countries at the UN General Assembly, including nations from Asia, Latin America, and Africa, to give legitimacy to its proposal. European sources confirmed that the Chinese plan was discussed, but the United States refused to support it, raising concerns in Kyiv. Zelensky, for his part, used his speech at the UN General Assembly to criticize the peace plan proposed by China and Brazil, calling it a colonial attempt. At the same time, the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry urged American lawmakers to formally reject the Chinese initiative, reinforcing its stance that peace can only be achieved on terms acceptable to Kyiv. Despite this, Ukraine is still counting on India's support for a more favorable peace agreement. Although Ukrainian diplomats fear that if China manages to garner support from a large number of countries, Beijing could present this as proof that most nations in the world support its terms for resolving the Ukraine crisis. Zelensky recently accused China and Brazil of collaborating with Russia by proposing peace initiatives that included giving up part of Ukraine's territories. For the Ukrainian leader, these proposals were unacceptable, especially because they involved handing over areas that were part of the former Soviet Ukraine, something that goes against Kyiv's interests. Despite massive Western military support for Ukraine, with billions of dollars in weapons being sent to aid the war effort, the Turkish president noted that there is significant resistance to the country's inclusion in NATO. Even though Western leaders have frequently expressed their support for Kyiv, the Turkish president is certain that many members of the alliance, including the United States, do not want Ukraine to join the military bloc. According to the Turkish president, several NATO nations, notably the United States, would prefer that Ukraine not become a member of the alliance. In an interview with an American television channel, he stressed that such issues need to be handled with caution, taking into account the current geopolitical reality. He also recalled that for any country to join NATO, the consent of all its members is required, and such a consensus is still far from being achieved in the case of Ukraine. It is worth noting that Kiev's desire to join NATO was one of the main reasons that triggered the current conflict. However, the Ukrainian authorities, led by Zelensky, continue to pursue this goal, including NATO membership as part of their victory plan, which was brought up for discussion in the United States. At the same time, the situation on the battlefield continues to evolve. Russian officials, including a presidential aide, stated that the territory of the Kursk region, currently occupied by Ukrainian forces, will soon be recaptured. The Kremlin stressed that the Russian armed forces are conducting planned operations to recapture the area and destroy the Ukrainian units present there. According to the Kremlin representative, there is no doubt that Russian military actions will lead to the recapture of the Kursk region in the near future. He praised the performance of Russian forces, calling them courageous and committed, adding that the general staff is implementing a detailed strategic plan that will culminate in the success of these operations. For the Russian government, military advancement into the occupied territory is a matter of time, and there is great pride in the efforts and courage of the troops involved. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and share it with your friends. Your interactions mean a lot to us and help us grow. See you next time.